Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring, fascinating women who are navigating aging with class and sass. I'm your host, Nicole Christina. Hey everyone, I am so grateful for all of the downloads, and I'd love a rating on iTunes and a comment. And please subscribe. It helps the show's rating so other people can find it and learn how to age well. And if you are loving the podcast, why not check out the companion online course, Zestful Aging, Simple and Sustainable Habits for Health and Longevity. You can access it through my website, NicoleChristina.com/Zestful Aging. It's based on the Harvard study of adult development, and I'm really proud of how it's turned out. Well, I've got my coffee in my hand and my trusty dog Sparky beside me, so let's begin. Dr. Ardra Cole is professor at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. In 2015, the Urban Animal Foundation awarded Ardra the Innovation Award for her work in creating ElderDog Canada, a national charity dedicated to aging people and aging dogs. Elder care was inspired by Ardra's research in the area of caregiving and seniors, her experience with her late dog Tattoo in animal-assisted therapy with seniors in long-term care, and by an old and ill chocolate lab named Mr. Brown. In the course of our conversation following the interview, I discovered that Ardra and I will both be presenting at the International Federation of Aging Conference in Toronto this August. This conference draws delegates from all over the world, covering a wide variety of subjects related to aging well. We plan to meet and I expect share dog photos. I hope to give you a follow-up on the progress of her program. Welcome to the show, Ardra.
Thank you very much, Nicole. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, where would you like to start? I'm curious how your interest began with senior dogs. Is that a good place to start?
I think it's a wonderful place to start. As I was listening to you introduce me when you mentioned Tattoo and Mr. Brown, I could feel the smile spreading across my face. So that's a wonderful place to begin. I guess I'll begin with Tattoo, who was was a therapy dog. And Tattoo and I spent many years volunteering in long-term care facilities, and particularly in palliative care. And Tattoo's temperament was very mellow and laid back, and he actually chose palliative care as his specialty. He gravitated towards people who were at end of life and who he recognized as needing comfort. And the older he got, the more, I think the more skilled he became at comforting those people who, like him, were aging. And so I watched him closely, and really much of that time was spent in awe at how he was able to just observe and respond without hesitation to what individual people needed and wanted. And so he really gave so much comfort to people at end of life, and I learned a lot from that. And of course, he retired when it became a little bit too much for him. But I carried with me the lessons I learned from Tattoo, and when I began researching in the area of caregiving and Alzheimer's disease, I quite unexpectedly in some ways, learned so much more about what a significant role the family dog played in providing care and comfort and support of various kinds to people who were ill with forms of dementia, and also to their family caregivers. And so that led me on a path to learn more about that. And then circling back to the old dog question. I had a personal experience with a family member who died very suddenly and left behind his old and ill chocolate lab, Mr. Brown. And Mr. Brown, as many people would know, as a dog who had a terminal illness and who was up in years, Mr. Brown would not have very many options about where he would spend his remaining time. And so I quickly stepped forward and strongly suggested that to the rest of my family that Mr. Brown would find a place with me and my family for the rest of his life. And so Mr. Brown came to live with me and my dogs, my other dogs, including Tattoo. And watching those old dogs engage in the world and at their kind of slower pace, and observe the patience and the dignity and the humility and the joy that they encountered in the small things in life, really gave me pause to reflect on a lot of things about what was important, and it took me back to thinking about the senior people whose lives have been changed by illness and by age. And so because I had this personal experience in my life that was really life-changing with the death of a family member, and because I had this rich experience of spending time with Tattoo, volunteering in long-term and palliative care, and also because as a university researcher, I was in a very privileged position to bring together my skills and opportunities to really make a difference. And so all of this kind of gave rise to the charity that I founded called ElderDog Canada. It was one of those moments in life when you think, there are messages here in all of this. It's a coming together of things that at one time seemed perhaps rather disparate, but Mr. Brown and the kind of brought these experiences together, and really pointed out to me that this was the time to not just talk but to act, and to make a difference not only in the lives of older dogs who, for whatever reason, usually due to age and perhaps illness, might not be adoptable if they lose their senior companions, but also to make a difference in the lives of those seniors for whom their dogs are such an important part of their life.
Yeah, I think about, in the clinical terminology, this parallel process, of aging along with your dog.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's a lot of similarities that you describe, that everything obviously becomes slower. Perhaps the very small pleasures get more time, you get more focus, that life really has a different timing and a different quality as you describe it.
Absolutely. And, through ElderDog, and what we do through ElderDog, just kind of describe that briefly, is we help senior people who are living at home, and they have a dog who, for the most part, is their only companion, their what they would describe as their best friend, really their lifeline. Um, we help them if they need assistance caring for their dog, so that they can stay together as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And and as is often the case, if a senior person has to move into a retirement facility or long-term care, or is unable due to illness or death, able to care for their dog, then we we find new loving home for that dog, so that the dog can live out his or her life in, with dignity and respect, and with the kind of lifestyle that their senior companion would be pleased about. And so, through ElderDog, on a daily basis, we encounter seniors. We listen to their stories about what their dog means to them, and about how important it is for them to grow old along with their dogs, and what that means. And it can mean, sitting at the end of the day and, watching TV together. It could mean reading a book and having a dog and having one hand on the dog beside you. It could mean getting out for a walk, and having a little bit of exercise, fresh air, just for, as long as they're able. And many of the seniors we deal with are, their dogs really are their our only companions. And so we're dealing in our society um, with an extreme um, situation or phenomenon of loneliness and social isolation. And for many people, their companion animals are their only source of support. So, as you say, when, aging does bring with it many challenges, but also, many gifts of being able to appreciate the small things that in our busyness and hectic day-to-day lives, work lives, we sometimes, are only too often overlook.
Mm-hmm. Do you, I can hear that you're obviously a dog lover and appreciate all things, dog related, as I am. Do you find it challenging to describe to people, let's say administrators, for example, or other entities in Canada where you're trying to develop this program? Do you find it challenging to describe to them the power of the human dog bond?
That's a really good question. Of course, the people who um, become involved with Elder Dog, and they're the ones who get it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are those who understand to some extent that dogs do play a role, but they understand it in terms of benefits. So there is a rich literature on the many benefits of companion animals to senior people, of course, to all people, but to senior people in particular. So, um, when people who are not all that familiar with or don't really understand the significance of the relationship, when they hear about, um, you know, dogs and seniors and why that's important, they immediately think, oh, yes, I've heard that dogs help to lower blood pressure, or dogs provide opportunities for exercise, or, the having or touch plays an important role in, uh, in helping working against heart disease, or oh yes, I've heard that when there's a dog around, people are more inclined to smile or speak to someone, and that's kind of the extent to which they understand the relationship. And in fact, that it's all very important, but I know from my own work, both through ElderDog and through my research, that really senior people themselves don't think about their dogs as benefits
Or tools.
or tools. These dogs are vital parts of their lives. And they're as significant, and some would say even more significant, than some of their human relationships. And so trying to get that across is my goal and the challenge. And so one of my recent research projects, in that project, I kind of took that on, because when we hear people say, or seniors say, this dog is the most important thing in my life, or this dog is my best friend, or this dog, I won't know what I would ever do without her if if something were to happen to this dog. And so when you hear people comment on that, you think, okay, what is it? This is not about benefit. This is about something much deeper that we need to understand and try to communicate.
It's about love. And how do you describe love if you've never felt it?
Absolutely. It is about love, and it's about deep attachment, and it's about, I think love on many levels, and in kind of many forms. Sometimes that's benevolent love. Sometimes that's, a love um, for a particular kind of companionship. Sometimes it's a love that, is as close to the love for, any other sentient being as one can get. And so, love is really at the heart of these relationships. And, trying to describe that, in to people who don't understand it, the best way I can think about trying to describe it is to use the words of the seniors themselves as they describe what this relationship means to them. And, because I think listening to those voices and those stories are so powerful, and seeing photographs of them in relationship, those pictures, they do say 1,000 words. And so, it's kind of my goal, really, to try to get at that richness of relationship and communicate it in ways that people will see it and get it in ways that move well beyond benefit.
That's beautiful. And is that part of the Grow Old Along with Me? Is that the project you're describing now?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a book with photographs?
Well, it's not a book yet. It will be a book. Currently, it's so the research project, the gathering of information, has been completed, and we worked intensively over a period of year with 14 senior people between the ages of 60 and 99, and their canine companions. And we followed them. We spent time in their homes, walking with them, at leisure, at work, at rest, and just in any variety of ways that they spent time with their dogs, and talked with them about their dogs, and also took hundreds of photographs to capture that relationship. And so the project, the stage of the project right now, we've created a public exhibit of those photographs and stories that has gone on a tour locally to the communities within which the seniors live, to try to get the message out to people in the communities about how important this relationship is.
I have a informal therapy dog. I'm a clinical social worker, so I
Mm-hmm.
have my own practice, and I have an older Jack Russell Terrier who's actually sleeping behind me right now as we speak. And what I found so interesting, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, is he's very different with each client. And it's not that some he approaches and some he doesn't, but he approaches them in different ways. I would even say in different styles. Some he's a little pushier with, like, pet me, kind of pushing right up against them. Some he's more just not quite as direct. But I noticed that there's this gauging. There's this what I would say is almost like, what are your needs here? How close do you want me? Is that something that you've noticed as well as their ability? I know this is anthropomorphizing terribly, but to intuit almost, what the person needs.
Absolutely, and I noticed that most poignantly with animal-assisted therapy with my dog Tattoo. Um, and he would do something similar. So we would go to um, palliative care unit on a regular basis, or even in long-term care, other units. And when we would go to visit people who were up to having us visit, and we would walk into a room, and almost without even hesitating, he would know exactly what was needed. And as you say, sometimes he would walk right up to someone sitting, in a wheelchair, or sitting in a comfortable chair, and all he would do was put his head on a person's lap, just very, very quietly. Other times he would be, a little bit more playful, noting that, this person was, more up to that. And then at other times, he would astound me when a person might be, lying in bed, and I would think, okay, how are we possibly going to get over to that bed and get him high enough so that this person can touch him at least? Well, while I was trying to figure all of that out, he had already solved the problem and, kind of figured out where this frail elderly person was in the bed, very quietly and deftly jumped up on the bed
Oh my goodness.
where he wasn't, I had never even seen him on furniture at home. He jumped up on the bed, wiggled his way up alongside, and put his head on this person's shoulder. And they lay together in quiet comfort for a good 10 minutes. Now, only moments earlier, he was, quotes, playing or playfully interacting with the person next door. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing that you're talking about. How else can we describe that other than intuiting, right?
It's remarkable, and it sounds like even though you are a dog lover from way back and you've observed dogs in all kinds of situations, it sounds like you're still surprised.
I am, and I enjoy that because it really, I think one of the things that I've learned most from not only my dogs but from all the dogs with whom I interact, I've learned the important quality of humility. That we as humans do know a lot, but if we just kind of stand back and observe and give credence to what our dogs know and can tell us, we really do become quite humbled by what we can learn from those observations. So I think that surprise is really something that I welcome because it just reminds me that there is so much that we can't know.
Wow, it sounds like a really touching and important project.
It it is, and I think that there is a lot of research in the area of human-animal bond and dogs and seniors and so on and so forth. But from this work, this in-depth work, spending time alongside senior people and their dogs and observing them closely in relationship, it adds a whole new dimension to what we can learn from, how we can understand, and then in turn, what we as researchers or people in positions of responsibility and decision making can do to support that relationship and can do to advocate for that relationship to be supported.
What is your ultimate hope for Elder Dog Canada? What would you like to see happen?
To be redundant, so that because right now, so for so many people, we are the lifeline. We're the only support that they have, and it shouldn't be that way. Of course, there will always be a place, and there will be an increasing need as our population ages, and it's aging quickly. There'll always be a need for support for seniors with their companion animals and for when they can no longer care for their dogs. But, my goal really is to advocate for our communities to understand the important role that dogs play in seniors' lives and to think carefully about how we as communities and a society, can and need to think about how we can put supports in place to foster this important relationship because it's an a vital part of senior health and well-being. And so there are lots of conversations about, positive aging and supporting seniors, in their as they age. But very little of that support is given to, or conversations don't necessarily turn to the role, supporting the role of dogs as part of, positive aging. And so, we don't have sufficient housing accommodation for seniors to be able to take their dogs, into retirement or assisted living. Seniors who are on very modest fixed income, well, we need ways that they can provide veterinary care for their beloved companion animal. And because we know that many seniors will opt out of their own care in favor of caring for their dog. We hear this day in and day out. So there has to be a much greater awareness of the conditions under which senior people are living in order to be able to keep their dogs with them as long as possible. And once there's that awareness, we need to be able to pay attention to it and do something about it to support this important relationship.
Hello, Zestful Agers. A short intermission to thank you for the incredible amount of downloads. I love creating this podcast, and it's so satisfying to know that you are enjoying it too. Creating and hosting Zestful Aging has been a blast, but it does require a lot of time and resources to deliver a high-quality interview to you every week. So I've signed up with Patreon, which is kind of like Kickstarter, but for ongoing artistic projects. Unlike Kickstarter, the donations are recurrent and the amount is usually smaller. When you become a patron of Zestful Aging, you will receive special benefits like behind-the-scenes info, a place to communicate with other listeners, as well as other patron-only bonuses. These funds will be used to make equipment upgrades, particularly for mobile interviewing, and to travel to interview guests, like to New York City to interview participants in the Diversity Fashion Show. I also need to hire a professional editor. So please go to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and make a small but vital donation. Thank you for contributing to the ongoing success of Zestful Aging, and I can't wait to bring you more juicy, inspiring interviews. Now back to the show. So it's like this two-pronged approach where you want to look at policy changes that support this profoundly important part of seniors' life in terms of their quality of life, but you are also documenting this loving relationship that almost has no words, right? I mean, I hear like two parts of this that you really want to make this. There's logistics. There's the logistics part, and then there's just look at this beauty.
That's absolutely right, and it's interesting too, because we know that to inform and influence policy, mostly we need to rely on, kind of the cost benefits analysis, right?
Right.
So what return do I get for investing in, dog care support for seniors, for example? Well, we do know of the benefits, and we do know that When dogs are part of seniors' lives, the use of prescription drugs goes down. The access to, or not access, but the frequency of visits to family physicians and hospitals decreases. And so those are the kinds of figures and data that policymakers and decision makers really need to hear. So that's all important. But there's also, at the emotional level, the beauty and the love and the qualitative difference that this shift in policy will make. That's what we need to capture and communicate as well. So it's
So,
not really an either or. It's a both and.
does Justin Trudeau have dogs?
No, he doesn't.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Is he, I don't want to get you into hot water politically. I'm just curious, is this something that's come across his desk, and is this something he's looked at and understood, some of the initiatives you're trying to put forward?
Well, of course, there's within our Department of Veteran Affairs, there's been a strong advocacy for um, uh, supporting and recognizing and supporting service dogs for veterans. And that I think under the new government, there has been increased support for that. So we and of course there is an effort in our government to we have a strong a government that supports social policy and social responsibility. So there's a strong commitment to our aging population and so on and so forth. So I think it needs to just get on the radar a little bit stronger.
Yeah, there's pieces of this, it sounds like, that are already being done well. And so yeah, I can just see that you have to be a little bit higher profile perhaps for people to really understand it. With veterans, maybe people can catch on to that a little bit better. It's
Hmm.
been, in the press more, at least here in the US, veterans with dogs. People kind of get that and they're used to that idea. And so maybe that will be a little bridge for them to understand what you know about the importance of the dog senior relationship.
Yes, and it's interesting that for veterans with dogs, of course, the dogs do perform a very important service, and so they are service dogs. With dogs who live with seniors who are living, at home in whatever, circumstances they live in, they're not seen as service dogs. They're
Right. It's
companions.
a different relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Not to say that the love is not there between a person who and his or her service dog, because of course it's a relationship of love, but it's
Right.
also recognized as something a little bit different.
More like I could see in the realm of a, not exactly a tool, but, I need your assistance in these discrete ways.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is an important function, important and identifiable role to play, and again, it's easy to define and describe that, much easier than I think it is to describe the significance of supporting um, senior dog companionship in the home.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can see that. You know, I came across something recently which you probably know all about. It's this living will document called Five Wishes. And it's through Aging with Dignity here in the States. And one of the things that they ask about, it's in very layman kind of language. It's not, there's no legal feel to it. It's just like, here are some of your options. What are the things that are important to you at the end of life? And one of them was, do you want your dogs with you? And
Mm.
so there's this whole piece about how you want this to look. And I just recently filled this out and was sort of forced to say, what do I really want this to look like? And of course I want my dogs by my side. I mean, I wouldn't even be, that was not a hard decision. And so I would encourage anybody who thinks that's important to them and has this loving relationship that we're talking about to provide that information to make sure that it happens.
That is so, so important. And, on a almost daily basis, we get through ElderDog again, we get calls from distraught people who say, I am in a position where I have to move out of my home and into whether it's retirement or a long-term care or whatever, and I cannot take my dog with me.
Mm.
And then of course it's the hardest call to make.
Mm.
And this person probably has just lost her husband or partner.
Mm-hmm.
That means a significant reduction in capacity to live in the family home. So the family home must go, and
Mm.
all of that means. And then my companion of 10, 12, 13 years, well, he must go too.
Mm.
I mean, just think about the loss, the
Mm.
compounded loss that
Oh.
we are forcing people to deal with because we're not able to adequately provide. We don't respect that wish that you've just described.
Yeah, that's cruelty.
It
I mean,
is.
that really is. That is, it's not necessary, and it is, oh my goodness, it's just heartbreaking. And I'm sure that the seniors are not only heartbroken broken for themselves, but worried about their animals. Are they going to be taken care of properly? Are they going to be loved?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, when you have a dog in your life, and I have four, being without even imagining life without a dog,
Mm-hmm.
it's unimaginable, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when um, as we age, some of us slow down, and then if you're choosing, or for whatever reason, you're not as active as you once were, and you have more time on your hands or more time to just be at home. That's when you need your companionship. I mean, we know that old age is the time of life when animal companionship is most important. And it's
Mm-hmm.
also the time when we're denying that companionship to so
Mm-hmm.
many. So imagining, you know, our our later years without, having a dog in our lives when, that's been such an important part of us for so long. It is cruel.
I we've talked about the absolute pleasure of seeing when this works, of seeing when Tattoo could really read the situation and seeing sort of this magic happen. And I'm sure that fills your heart. But there's also obviously a long way to go. And I'm wondering how you, in your personal life, deal with some of the frustrations and the challenges of making this happen in a bigger way. And that, obviously good things are happening. It looks like the future's bright in terms of these programs, but right now you're still dealing with a lack of understanding, a lack of policy. So, how do you deal with some of this in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one step at a time, really. And I think this is really where, I feel very fortunate in my role as a university professor and researcher. Um, so it's where, privilege and responsibility kind of come together. So I do feel that because I have chosen to invest my energies into this area of work, both in my professional life and in my kind of volunteer life and in my personal life. I do have, I do have opportunities to write about the importance of this, to do interviews about the importance of this. We get a fair bit of media attention. So, and ElderDog continues to grow across the country, and through ElderDog, the message gets out there. So, coming at it in from so many different directions, really, and you're not going to change the world overnight, but you're not going to stand still either. And so, it's to me, we do have a responsibility as university researchers to make a difference where we can. And so, this is what I've chosen to do, and I'm just hoping that the efforts, well, I know that they're are paying off in small ways, and those small ways will continue to grow, and who knows what can happen.
Where can people find out more about your projects? I'm really curious about Grow Old Along with Me, and of course Elder Dog. Are there particular websites that you can talk about so our listeners can learn more about your initiatives?
Well, ElderDog Canada has a website, and it's very simple. It's elderdog.ca.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of information there about ElderDog, and of course I have a Facebook page and so on. That's linked to the website. And and the Grow Old Along with Me project, any information that people are interested in, they could contact me personally through ardra.cole@msvu.ca.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. Any last words that you want to share with our listeners? Any last impressions or anything you'd like to say in closing about your work and your passions?
Well, I mean, first, thank you for the opportunity. I guess, one thing I would like to say is, if as a result of listening to our conversation, you might see a friend, a family member, a neighbor, or someone in passing, with a dog, you might see that relationship just a little bit differently, and think about from your position, what you might be able to do to support that relationship, because I think we all have an important role to play, whether you're a neighbor, or maybe you're a politician, or you have a business. There are things that we all can do to advocate for and support the relationship between senior people and their dogs. And so I would just encourage people to look and then look again when you see that relationship in action.
What a great piece of advice. So pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah.
That's great advice, I think, in general. Thank you so much, Ardra, for sharing your passion and your vision and all the good work you're doing. I can't wait to publish this. I think our listeners are going to really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you for the opportunity, Nicole. I'm very appreciative, and give that little Jack Russell a little belly rub.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. I love to hear from my listeners, so send me an email at NicoleChristina.com and tell me what you'd like to hear more about. I would also greatly appreciate if you could hop on iTunes and rate the show. Ratings help other people find the podcast so I can share all these good, juicy interviews with others. I would also invite you to become a patron of the Zestful Aging podcast. Hop on over to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and consider making a small donation. You will be eligible for insider-only goodies and behind-the-scenes information, and it'll help you feel good knowing that you're contributing to the Zestful Aging podcast. I'll look forward to sharing more juicy interviews next week on Zestful Aging.